Isaac Granger didn't think offering a stranger a water bottle would flip his entire world upside down, but then again, nothing in his life had gone according to plan since his wife passed. "Daddy, can we get the blue popsicles this time?" His 7-year-old son, Jasper, asked, tugging at his hand as they stepped out of the community clinic. Isaac smiled down at him, brushing a hand through the boy's shaggy brown hair. "Only if you promise not to eat them all in one day." Jasper grinned, nodding enthusiastically. They were about halfway to the corner store when Isaac noticed her stumbling, heels wobbling, hand pressed to her forehead. She looked out of place in this dingy part of Brooklyn. Sleek navy dress, designer heels, a leather bag clutched tightly in her hand. Then, without warning, she collapsed right there by the bus stop. "Jasper, stay close," Isaac said, rushing toward the woman as people just walked by like it was nothing. She was breathing, but her skin was pale and damp. Isaac crouched beside her and gently touched her shoulder. "Miss, can you hear me?" Her lips moved barely. "Water." Isaac reached into his backpack and pulled out the half-full bottle he always kept for Jasper. "Here," he said, uncapping it and lifting her head slightly. "Sip slowly." She took a few shaky sips before her eyes fluttered open ice blue, confused and sharp. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking around like she had no idea where she was. "Did I faint?" "Yeah, you went down hard," Isaac said, offering a warm but cautious smile. "You okay?" She blinked a few times, sitting up with effort. I think I skipped breakfast. Not the best idea in heels," he said. "You want me to call someone?" "An Uber?" "No," she said quickly, then winced. "I'll be fine, I just need a minute." "You sure?" he asked. "Yes, thank you, for the water." Jasper peeked from behind his leg. "You fell down." The woman let out a soft breath of laughter. "I did, didn't I?" She looked at Isaac, studying him like she was trying to figure something out. "You're his dad." "Sure am," Isaac said, patting Jasper's back. "Single dad club, you know." She gave a slow nod, then began pushing herself up. Isaac offered his hand, and after a pause, she took it. "I'm Harlow Lane," she said, brushing dust off her dress. "Isaac Granger." Her knees wobbled. "Okay, maybe not fine yet," he said quickly, steadying her. "Look, there's a diner around the corner. You should sit down, eat something." "I shouldn't, please. You're gonna pass out again. My treat," he added. "I can pay for myself," she said immediately, her voice sharp. Isaac raised a brow but didn't push. "All right then." "But you're still coming." She hesitated, then nodded once. Inside the diner, Jasper ordered pancakes the size of his head, and Harlow, after some internal war, chose an omelet. She was clearly uncomfortable, not used to small booths or syrup-sticky menus. "You from around here?" Isaac asked, sipping his black coffee. Harlow shook her head. "No, I got off at the wrong subway stop. My assistant was supposed to send a driver, but..." She trailed off, frowning. "Not your kind of neighborhood, huh?" "I didn't mean it like that." "It's all right," Isaac said with a chuckle. "Most people don't end up here on purpose." She looked at him for a long moment. "You said you're a single dad," he nodded, his tone softening. "Jasper's mom passed away 3 years ago. Car accident? I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Her gaze shifted to Jasper, who was now creating a syrup lake on his plate. "He's sweet. He's my whole world." They ate in silence for a while. Harlow seemed more relaxed by the time the check came. She reached for her bag, but Isaac already had a 20 on the table. "I said I could pay," she said, "and I said you fainted. That earns you eggs, at least." She looked like she wanted to argue, then gave up. "Thank you." Outside, the sun had warmed the sidewalks, and Harlow took a deep breath like she was finally grounding herself. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Isaac asked. "No, I'll be all right." She looked at him again, her expression unreadable. "You're different? Is that good or bad?" She smiled faintly. "I haven't decided," he laughed. "Well, if you ever faint again, you know where to find me." "I hope I don't. But thank you, Isaac." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. "Dad," Jasper said, tugging his sleeve. "She was really pretty." Isaac smirked. Yeah, she was. He didn't expect to see her again. But 3 days later, when he walked into the school gym to pick Jasper up from aftercare, there she was. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and slacks, talking to the school principal. "What the?" he muttered. "Daddy, that's the fainting lady." Harlow turned, hearing the voice. Her expression changed from cool confidence to something softer when she saw Isaac. "Hi," she said simply. "You stalking me now?" he teased, walking up to her. "I could ask you the same," she replied. He glanced around. "You don't seem like the PTA type." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not. I'm here because my company is donating new computers to the school." "Oh, that's generous. I'm full of surprises. You're not kidding." There was a pause, then she said, "I was actually hoping I'd run into you." "Really?" he asked, surprised. "I owed you a proper thank you and maybe an apology for how awkward I was. You were fine." "I wasn't. But I'd like to make it up to you. Let me buy you dinner," he blinked. "You're asking me out." "I don't usually do this," she said quickly. "But yes, I am." Isaac laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, I'm in. Tomorrow night, I'll find a sitter." She smiled. "I'll send a car." "No need, I've got the subway." She leaned in, voice soft. "I wasn't asking." And just like that, she walked off again, leaving Isaac staring after her with his heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Jasper tugged his hand. "Are you gonna marry her?" Isaac snorted. "Let's start with dinner first, buddy." But something about the way she looked at him, it felt like more than just dinner. The car that pulled up in front of Isaac's apartment the following evening wasn't just any car. It was a black Bentley with a uniformed driver who stepped out and opened the door like this was some kind of royal summons. Isaac stared at it from the sidewalk, adjusting the collar of the light gray button-down he'd borrowed from his brother. "You sure she said dinner and not a job interview?" he muttered. The driver gave a polite nod. "Mr. Granger," Isaac raised his hand. "Yeah. That's me." The interior of the car was all sleek leather and quiet hums. He barely had time to get comfortable before the driver pulled away from the curb like they were gliding. Traffic didn't seem to exist for them. Every light was green, every turn seamless. 15 minutes later, they pulled up to a restaurant that didn't have a name on the outside, just towering glass windows, a gold-trimmed entrance, and a doorman who greeted the driver by name. Isaac stepped out, blinking at the place. He'd eaten at plenty of diners, pizza joints, and food trucks. But this looked more like a palace than a restaurant. Before he could go inside, the door opened, and there she was. Harlow wore a deep charcoal dress that hit just below her knees, her hair swept up away from her face like it belonged in a magazine spread. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, no glitter, no dramatic jewelry, but somehow she looked like she owned the entire block. "You clean up well," she said, eyes running over him. "I feel like I should have brought a resume." She laughed softly. "Don't worry. You're not here to impress anyone." She paused. "Except maybe me." He followed her inside, past the host who greeted her like she was royalty. They were led to a private room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, a table already set with candles and a bottle of wine on ice. "So," Isaac said, taking the seat across from her, "should I ask how you managed to get this room, or would the answer scare me?" "I know the owner," she said, pouring a glass of wine for herself. "He owes me a favor." Isaac picked up the menu and immediately put it back down. "I don't think I can pronounce half of these." "You don't need to," she said, signaling the waiter. "I already ordered for us." He raised a brow. Confident, she tilted her head. "You trusted me with water and your kid. I think I've earned the right to pick your entree." The food arrived in courses, small, artfully presented plates with flavors Isaac couldn't have imagined if he tried. The steak practically melted, the vegetables had names he'd never heard, and the dessert was some kind of chocolate creation that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it wasn't the food that had his attention. It was her. She asked about Jasper, about Isaac's work as a mechanic, about the old Mustang he was rebuilding in his garage. She didn't fake interest. She leaned in, asked follow-up questions, laughed in the right places. And when he asked about her, she didn't dodge. "I started with nothing," she said, running her finger along the rim of her glass. "My mom worked 3 jobs. My first suit came from a thrift store. I used to sneak into business lectures at Columbia just to hear how they talked." Isaac leaned back, watching her. "And now I own a tech company that's being courted for acquisition in 7 countries." He let out a low whistle. "I thought you said your assistant was supposed to send a driver." "You didn't mention you were the boss." "I don't usually introduce myself by saying I employ 300 people. I guess fainting by a bus stop says plenty." She gave a quiet laugh. "That day was not my best. You looked like you'd just survived a war. I had, corporate warfare. We were closing a deal with a firm in Zurich, and my CFO walked out mid-negotiation. I hadn't eaten or slept properly in 2 days. Isaac nodded slowly. And you still came to the school, her gaze drifted to the window. My company runs a program that donates resources to underfunded schools. I try to visit every site we impact. That one was scheduled months ago. That's a lot of pressure. She looked at him again. You know something about pressure, don't you? He didn't answer immediately. It's different. My pressure doesn't involve boardrooms or million-dollar contracts. It's more like making sure my son eats and doesn't grow up wondering why his mom's not around. Her eyes softened. That sounds harder. Some days it is. The waiter cleared their plates and Harlow poured more wine. You're not what I expected, she said, watching the wine swirl in her glass. Because I didn't Google you after you passed out. Because most people either want something from me or run the second they find out what I do. Isaac met her gaze. I'm not most people. No, she said, voice low. You're not. He pushed his glass aside. This feels like more than dinner. I told you, I don't usually do this. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But there's something about you, something real. He leaned in slightly. And what are you hoping this becomes? Her eyes held his, unflinching. I don't know yet. But I'd like to find out. Isaac didn't answer. Instead, he reached across the table and brushed her hand with his. She didn't pull away. Okay, he said quietly. Let's find out. The drive back was quiet, comfortable. The city lights passed by in a blur, and neither of them felt the need to fill the silence. When the car stopped in front of his building, Isaac turned to her. You want to come in? She shook her head. Not tonight, but I'm not disappearing either. He nodded. Good. She leaned in, and for a moment he wasn't sure if she was going to hug him or kiss him, but she did neither. She just pressed her forehead lightly to his, then pulled back and opened the door. I'll call you, she said. I'll answer. She disappeared into the night, and the Bentley pulled away like it had never been there. Inside, Isaac locked the door behind him and leaned against it, heart thudding. He didn't know what this was yet. But Harlow Lane wasn't just a passing moment. She was the beginning of something big, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a sleek marble-floored lobby that looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. Isaac stepped out, adjusting the collar of his navy sport coat, feeling absurdly out of place but trying not to show it. He'd never been in a penthouse before, let alone one that spanned the entire top floor of a Manhattan high-rise. A hostess greeted him with a tablet in hand and asked for his name before leading him through a glittering crowd of sharply dressed guests. The room buzzed with soft jazz and quiet laughter, the air perfumed by expensive cologne and truffle hors d'oeuvres. Whatever Harlow had invited him to tonight, it wasn't just another dinner. He found her near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, speaking to a man in a tuxedo who clutched a crystal decanter like it held national secrets. She wore a satin black gown that curved and shimmered with every movement, her hair pulled back in a way that revealed the sharp line of her jaw and a pair of understated diamond studs. When she saw Isaac, her expression shifted, not just pleased, relieved. You came, she said, stepping toward him. You said it was a small event, he replied, scanning the room. This looks like the Met Gala had a baby with Wall Street, she laughed under her breath. It's a fundraising gala. My company sponsors the foundation that provides scholarships for underrepresented STEM students. I had to make an appearance, and you brought me because I didn't want to do this alone, she said simply. Besides, you clean up well. He glanced down at his blazer and slacks. I bought this at a department store 2 hours ago. The sales guy gave me cologne samples and a pep talk. Well, he deserves a raise. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes. Harlow grabbed one and handed it to Isaac, then took a glass for herself. Come on, she said, touching his arm lightly. I want to introduce you to someone. They made their way through the crowd, stopping in front of a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, wearing a navy velvet suit with emerald cufflinks. She looked at Isaac like she was sizing up a chess opponent. This is Evelyn Roth, Harlow said. She's the foundation's chairwoman. Evelyn, this is Isaac Granger. The woman extended her hand. Granger, as in Granger Auto, Isaac blinked. Yeah, that's me. I had a '69 Camaro in college. Your shop rebuilt the engine for my nephew's wedding gift last spring. Isaac's brow lifted. That was your car? Evelyn nodded. It ran like sin after your team finished with it. Good work. Thank you, he said, surprised she remembered. That was one of my favorites. I can see why Harlow brought you, Evelyn said, giving him a look that wasn't quite disapproval but wasn't far from it. You're not just decoration. He's not here to impress anyone, Harlow said calmly. He's here because I wanted him to be. Evelyn gave a small nod, then wandered off toward a group of donors. Isaac leaned closer. You know, she almost smiled. That was her smiling, Harlow said. Believe me. They moved toward the terrace, where the music was quieter and the breeze softened the heat of the crowded room. You didn't tell me you knew half the city's elite, Isaac said, setting his glass down on the stone railing. I don't care about them, she said, stepping closer. I care about this, being here with you. You sure? Because I saw a guy over there who looked like he owns at least 2 oil fields. He probably does. And you brought the guy who replaced his own kitchen faucet with duct tape and prayer. She laughed, and it wasn't the polished laugh she used with donors and board members. It was real. Unfiltered, she rested her hand on his chest just over his heartbeat. I don't want a man who lives in a penthouse, she said. I want a man who knows how to fix things with his hands. Careful, he said quietly. You keep saying stuff like that, and I might start believing this is real. She looked up at him, her eyes suddenly serious. It is real. He was about to answer when a man stepped out onto the terrace, holding a wine glass and wearing the kind of tailored suit that cost more than Isaac's car. Harlow, he said smoothly. I didn't expect to see you with company. Harlow's posture shifted, her hand falling away from Isaac's chest. Julian, I thought you were in Dubai. Julian smiled like he owned the air. Flight got in this morning. I was hoping to speak with you privately. I'm not available for that. The man's gaze flicked to Isaac. Clearly, Isaac didn't move. He didn't need to. He just watched Harlow, waiting. Julian took a sip of wine. I assume you've told him about the merger. Harlow's jaw tightened. It's not finalized, but it will be. And when it is, everything changes. Not everything. Julian gave a cool smile and walked back inside. Isaac exhaled slowly. You want to tell me what that was? She didn't answer right away. Then finally, Julian's the CEO of a tech conglomerate in Europe. His firm's trying to acquire mine. Isaac nodded. And the merger would mean relocating my headquarters to Geneva. Half my executive team would be replaced. It's complicated. Are you selling? I haven't decided. He looked at her. But you're considering it. Yes. And you didn't think to mention that. Her voice was low. I didn't want to scare you off before this even started. Isaac stepped back, running a hand down his face. Harlow, I'm raising a kid in Brooklyn. I can't just fly to Switzerland for weekend visits. I didn't say I was leaving. You didn't have to. The silence stretched between them, brittle and tight. I like you, she said finally, more than I expected to. But I can't make decisions about my company based on me, he finished. Yeah, I get it. I'm trying to figure this out. Isaac nodded once, then stepped away from the railing. Call me when you do. He didn't wait for her to respond. He walked back through the party, past the champagne and the sharp suits and the polite laughter. Past the life she lived and the future she was still deciding. Outside, the night air hit him like a slap. He didn't stop until he reached the curb. The valet asked if he needed a ride. Isaac shook his head. He needed time and space and answers she wasn't ready to give, but none of that stopped his chest from aching like he'd left something behind, because maybe he had. Rain tapped softly against the windshield as Isaac sat in his truck outside the shop, watching the last of the late customers pull away. He hadn't heard from Harlow in 8 days. Not a call, not a message. He hadn't expected silence, but maybe he should have. That world, she belonged to the penthouses, the galas, the mergers. It didn't leave much room for people like him. Dad. Isaac turned to see Jasper standing by the garage door, his backpack slung awkwardly over one shoulder. His raincoat was too big and the hood kept slipping over his eyes. You ready to go? Isaac asked, forcing a lightness into his voice. Jasper climbed into the passenger seat. Did you tell Miss Lane about my science fair yet? Isaac's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. No, buddy, she's been busy. Oh, Jasper looked down at his shoes. I saved her one of the flyers. You think she'll come? Isaac hesitated. I don't know. They drove home in the quiet, the wipers cutting through the drizzle. Jasper hummed softly, tapping his fingers to a tune Isaac didn't recognize. When they reached the apartment, Isaac helped him with his homework, made grilled cheese, and tucked him into bed without once checking his phone. He didn't want to look, didn't want to hope, but the next morning, everything changed. He was under a car, elbow deep in a transmission rebuild when he heard the door to the shop open. The voice that followed stopped him cold. Isaac. He slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. Harlow stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, hair clinging to her temples, heels forgotten in one hand and a folded sheet of paper in the other. You walked here. I took the subway. The car would have taken too long. He stood slowly, eyes searching hers for something he could hold on to. I'm sorry, she said before he could speak. I didn't call because I didn't know what to say, not until now. You made your decision then, she nodded, stepping closer. I turned down the merger, he blinked. You what? I terminated negotiations this morning. I'm staying. He stared at her, stunned. Why? Because I don't want a life built on compromises I'll regret. Because I realized something the night you walked out. I was building everything except what I actually wanted. She unfolded the paper in her hand and held it out to him. It was the flyer for the science fair. Jasper's name was written in messy red crayon across the bottom. I missed one of the most important invitations I've ever received, she said softly. I won't do it again. Isaac took the paper, his throat tightening. You didn't have to give up your company. I didn't give up anything, she said. I took control. For once, I put what I wanted before what looked good on paper. He looked at her, soaked and breathless in his garage, and realized he was looking at the woman who had changed everything without even trying. I don't know how to do this, he said. Neither do I, she replied, stepping closer until there was barely any space between them. But I want to try. He set the rag down and pulled her to him, kissing her like he was terrified and grateful all at once. She kissed him back with the same urgency, like they'd both been waiting for this moment to finally breathe. Later that afternoon, Harlow sat beside Isaac in the front row of the elementary school auditorium. Jasper stood on stage in a lab coat 3 sizes too big, explaining his volcano project with the seriousness of a scientist on the verge of a Nobel Prize. When the eruption fizzled out early, Harlow whispered, maybe next time add more baking soda. Don't tell him that, Isaac said under his breath. He'll turn the kitchen into a lava zone. After the applause, Jasper ran down the steps and threw his arms around both of them. You came, he beamed at Harlow. I wouldn't miss it, she said. You were brilliant. He grinned, then looked up at Isaac. Can we get pizza? Only if you let Miss Lane pick the toppings. Even pineapple, Harlow raised an eyebrow. Especially pineapple. They walked out into the late afternoon sun, the rain finally gone. Isaac's hand found hers without hesitation. The next few weeks passed in a blur of discovery. Harlow visited the shop, surprising Isaac with lunch and questions about spark plugs. He met her board of directors during a strategy retreat where he accidentally taught the CFO how to use a wrench. They hosted Jasper's birthday in her penthouse, where a magician lost his rabbit under the couch, and Harlow laughed so hard she cried. Isaac learned that she liked black coffee with a single sugar and that she hummed when she read contracts. Harlow discovered that he talked to engines like they were people, and that he had a quiet habit of watching the stars from the fire escape. It wasn't perfect, they argued. About time, about pride, about how different their worlds still were. But they always came back to each other. Always chose to fight for what they had rather than run from what scared them. One Saturday evening, Harlow led Isaac up the stairs of a brownstone in Park Slope. It was old, ivy-covered, and in need of love. Inside, the wood floors creaked and the kitchen smelled faintly of fresh paint. She handed him a key. What's this? Our new place, she said, if you want it. He looked around, stunned. This is yours, ours, she corrected. I bought it yesterday. It's got a garage out back and a room for Jasper with skylights. He stared at her. You sure? "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. He took the key, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her like he already belonged there. 3 months later, they stood in a garden behind the brownstone, surrounded by fairy lights and friends. Jasper tossed flower petals instead of confetti and declared he was the ring security manager. Harlow wore a simple ivory dress, her hair down, no veil. Isaac wore the same suit from the gala, this time with confidence. The vows were quiet, shared between tears and laughter. There was no orchestra, no ballroom, no press. Just them in the home they chose, in the life they built, with everything that truly mattered. When they kissed, Jasper shouted, "Now we're a team." Later, as the guests filtered out and the sun dipped below the rooftops, Harlow leaned against Isaac, barefoot in the grass. "You still think this started with a water bottle?" He kissed her temple. "No. It started with you crashing into my life like a hurricane." She smiled, eyes soft. "Still glad I did." He pulled her closer. "Best thing that ever happened to me." And under the glow of the lights, they'd strung together by hand. The woman who once fainted at a bus stop and the man who offered her water stood in the middle of their full circle forever, where love didn't ask for permission, only the courage to say yes. Isaac pushed open the garage door, the scent of sawdust and motor oil clinging to the air like a familiar comfort. The brownstone's detached garage had become more than just a place to park a sanctuary, really. Harlow had surprised him with a set of custom cabinets for his tools last week, and now the space was finally his. He stood for a moment, taking in the half-finished motorcycle he was restoring for a neighbor, the workbench cluttered with carefully organized projects, and the toolbox Jasper had labeled with crooked stickers. The sound of the back door creaking open made him glance over his shoulder. Harlow leaned against the doorframe, wearing one of his old flannel shirts and leggings, her bare feet quiet on the concrete as she padded over. "You've been out here a while," she said, her voice light but edged with curiosity. "I was rewiring the ignition coil," he said, setting down a wrench. "Lost track of time." She picked up a bolt from the workbench, examining it like it was a foreign object. "You know, I always thought garages were dark and greasy. This place is kind of peaceful." "That's because you haven't dropped one of these on your foot yet," he said, pointing to a socket wrench. "Noted," she said, setting it down carefully. "I came to steal you. Jasper's asleep. And I need your opinion on something important." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Is this about the bathroom tiles again?" She tilted her head. "No, but now that you mention it, those seafoam ones still look like toothpaste." "I said I'd change them." "I know. After you finish building the Eiffel Tower out of engine parts." He followed her back into the house, where candles flickered on the dining table, the lights dimmed and music playing low from the record player she'd insisted on keeping in the living room. "You did all this for an opinion?" he asked, stepping into the glow. She gestured to the center of the table, where a small velvet-lined box sat open, revealing a pair of antique wedding bands resting side by side. "I found them in a vintage shop in Soho," she said. "They're from the 1920s, engraved on the inside. I know we said we'd keep things simple, but..." He picked one up, turning it over gently. The inscription read, "Ever and always." "They're perfect," he said. She exhaled, visibly relieved. "Good. I was worried you'd think they were too sentimental." "I like sentimental," he said, pulling her closer. "Especially when it's you." They danced there in the quiet, her head resting against his chest, the rest of the world melting away. He thought about the first time he saw her half-conscious on a sidewalk in heels, looking like she'd fallen from a world he didn't belong to. And now she was here, in his house, in his arms, building a life with him that was more real than anything he could have imagined. "I was going to wait," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I had this whole plan. Dinner, rooftop, champagne. But I don't want to wait anymore." She looked up, confused for only a second until he reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a velvet box of his own. Inside was a ring with a deep sapphire center and a double halo of diamonds, set in platinum. Her breath caught. "Isaac, I asked your assistant what kind of jewelry you actually liked." She almost cried out of relief that I wasn't ordering it online. Harlow laughed, then went quiet as he dropped to one knee, the candlelight catching the blue stone. "I don't have the words for what you are to me," he said, "but I know I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want Jasper to grow up seeing what it looks like when two people choose each other every single day. So, Harlow Lane, will you marry me?" She didn't cry. She just smiled, and it was the kind of expression that made his chest ache with joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up into a kiss that tasted like promise. The wedding was held in the garden behind the brownstone 2 months later, under a canopy of linen and fairy lights. Harlow wore a tea-length dress with delicate lace sleeves, her hair swept back with a few wild strands framing her face. Jasper walked her down the aisle in a tiny navy suit, holding her hand like it was the most important mission of his young life. Isaac waited under the arch they'd built together, the antique ring in his pocket, his heart steady for the first time in years. They wrote their own vows. Harlow spoke of unexpected beginnings, of building something from chaos, of choosing love even when it terrified her. Isaac spoke of quiet mornings, of Jasper's laughter echoing through rooms that once felt hollow, of finding a home in someone's heart. When they kissed, the world around them erupted in applause and laughter. Confetti rained down from the trees, and Jasper blew a whistle so loud it made everyone jump. The reception spilled into the evening, string lights casting a warm glow over the tables. There was no formal dinner, just food trucks lined along the sidewalk, sushi, tacos, and a vintage ice cream cart that served pineapple sorbet in waffle cones. Harlow danced barefoot on the lawn, her dress twirling as Isaac spun her around. Jasper joined in, doing his version of breakdancing while the neighbors cheered him on. Later, as the guests slowly filtered out and the music faded, Harlow leaned against Isaac on the porch swing they'd hung together the week before. "You know," she said, twining her fingers with his, "I used to think success meant having everything polished and perfect. And now I know it means building something honest, something that lasts." He kissed her temple. "We're just getting started." Months passed, and their life settled into a rhythm that was theirs alone. Harlow set up a satellite office in Brooklyn, refusing to return to the glass tower she once believed defined her. She spent more time on projects that mattered: mentorship programs, small business grants, tech camps for girls in underfunded districts. Isaac expanded the shop, hiring 2 apprentices from the vocational school across town. He still picked up Jasper every afternoon, still packed him lunch every morning with little notes taped to the lid. They didn't chase perfection. They built something better: real, flawed, beautiful. On Saturday mornings, they made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. On Wednesday nights, they played cards until someone fell asleep at the table. And every evening, no matter how chaotic the day, they found their way back to each other. One night, after Jasper had gone to bed, Harlow stepped out onto the fire escape where Isaac sat, a blanket around his shoulders and 2 mugs in his hands. "You forgot the marshmallows," she said, taking the hot chocolate he handed her. "I'll double them next time." She sat beside him, the city stretching out in glowing silence below. "I love you," she said. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. He just took her hand and kissed it, resting it against his chest. There wasn't a single thing missing, no cliffhangers. No questions, just a life fuller than either of them had imagined, built one honest, fearless moment at a time. And in the quiet glow of their world, they held each other close ever and always.